If we put your wheelchair in the center, it'll ruin the whole shot. That's what my brother said on a bright Saturday afternoon with the lake behind us looking like a postcard and my family lined up in their carefully coordinated outfits. My name is Lena Hart, and in that moment, I was standing 2 feet away from my daughter, close enough to see her knuckles tighten around the rims of her wheels when she heard him. Rosie had spent all week decorating her chair for this reunion. She called it Comet because in her mind it didn't just move, it streaked. She'd wrapped tiny string lights around the frame, dotted the spokes with hand-drawn stickers, and picked a white dress with purple flowers because she said it made her look like a caption in a summer movie. She thought today was about family. My family thought today was about appearances. Marcus didn't lower his voice when he said it. He stared past me, past Rosie toward the photographer and the man in the linen blazer standing by the porch, the one he'd spent months trying to impress. I watched his jaw flex like my child's wheelchair was not the thing ruining his shot, but the thing ruining his career. Is he kidding? Rosie whispered, just loud enough for me to hear. Her eyes were on me, not him. She wasn't looking for an explanation, she was looking for a defense. For a second, I felt every version of myself tugging in different directions. The daughter who never talked back, the sister who smoothed everything over, the single mom who couldn't afford to burn bridges, and the mother whose whole body was screaming that you do not let anyone tell your child they don't belong in the picture. 2 weeks later, I would make sure the entire world saw exactly what he tried so hard to crop out. The morning we left for the lake house, Rosie was already waiting by the door with her sketchbook clutched to her chest, tapping it like she held a secret. I carried our bags out while she guided Comet down the ramp with a flourish, the teal lights she'd added blinking softly. She'd woken early to make sure everything matched her dress, her chair, the ribbon in her hair. She kept saying this reunion felt big, something she'd want to remember. I tried to focus on her excitement instead of the messages I'd been getting all week. Ivy wanted me to tone down the chair decorations. Mom said she hoped the photos would look classic, meaning simple. Marcus just sent a thumbs up when I said we were coming warm for him when Keller was involved. I told myself none of it mattered. Rosie deserved this day. Halfway through the drive, she began sketching drawing the lake house from memory and adding stick figures of our family waving from the porch. When she showed me her proud smile pushed everything else aside. "You think they'll like it?" she asked. I didn't answer right away. I just watched how she imagined belonging and my chest tightened. When we turned onto the long gravel driveway, the cars were already lined up, Marcus's SUV, Ivy's spotless crossover, a rental that must have been Keller's. Rosie didn't notice. She was focused on the porch, the sunlight, the idea of being welcomed. And for a moment longer than I'd admit, I wished I believed it would go the way she imagined. Judith opened the door before we reached the steps, her smile wide enough to seem welcoming, until her eyes dropped to Comet. The teal frame caught the sun scattering light, and for half a heartbeat she froze. Then she recovered, hugging me first, then Rosie, with a practiced warmth that never quite reached her eyes. "Look at you," she said, "all dressed up." She didn't mention the lights, the stickers, the ribbons. Just, "Let's get you settled." Inside the house buzzed with voices and footsteps. A perfectly arranged snack spread sat on the counter, classic Ivy. She appeared seconds later, hair in a glossy twist. She hugged us, but her gaze inspected Comet like she was assessing risk. "It looks festive," she said, stretching the word thin. Then leaning in, Marcus is in hosting mode. "Just keep an eye on the visuals, okay? Today matters." Today. The way she said visuals made my spine go rigid. Rosie didn't notice. She'd already spotted her cousins and asked to join them. I said yes, and she rolled off toward the yard wheels humming over hardwood and then gravel. As soon as she vanished, Ivy exhaled in relief. Judith fussed with a charcuterie board that didn't need fussing. From the living room came Marcus's laugh, sharp, performative, reserved for people who could help him climb. I followed the sound and found him with a tall man in a linen blazer, Grant Keller. Marcus stood straight, voice polished, every gesture curated. He gave me his networking smile, thin, professional. "Glad you made it," he said, then turned back to Keller, as if I were an aside. And standing there, half ignored in my own family's house, I felt the first quiet warning that something in this weekend was already slipping out of place. The next afternoon, sunlight washed the lawn in that soft, golden way photographers dream of, light that makes everything look kinder than it is. Marcus's photographer was already setting up by the willow tree, his assistant lining up equipment. Rosie's laughter floated from the dock where she played with her cousins. It almost looked like a perfect family moment. When the photographer called for the grandkids, Rosie lit up. She spun Comet in a slow circle, then headed toward the group, her dress fluttering like she was floating. For a moment, she matched the scene she'd drawn in her sketchbook. Marcus caught my arm before I could follow. His grip was firm, his crisis management smile locked in place. "Lena, we need to talk," he said, pulling me aside. Ivy joined us, heels clicking like punctuation. "If Rosie and the chair go front and center, that's all Keller will see," Marcus said. "It throws off the composition. The symmetry. He talked about my daughter like she was clutter. Heat surged through me. She's not a prop. She can be in the big group shot Ivy offered like it was generosity. Just not these smaller ones. It's just aesthetics. The chair reflects weirdly. The photographer said so. I glanced at him. He wasn't even looking our way. The lie slid down smooth. The photographer called again. Rosie was already in position, smiling ready. And what tore at me was how certain she looked, that she belonged there, how she didn't yet know love can still push you to the edge of the frame. Marcus leaned in. "Lena, please, don't make this a thing." Rosie turned, then her smile dimming as she saw our huddle. "Mom, is something wrong?" Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried clear, fragile. I imagined walking over, standing beside her, telling them all to grow up. But with everyone watching and pressure closing in, I swallowed the words that mattered. "No, honey," I said. "Just sit this one out. We'll take our own pictures later." I saw the instant her heart cracked, and mine split right along with it. That night, the lake house felt quieter than it should have. Everyone else was downstairs drinking wine, proud of how smooth the photos had gone. Their laughter floated through the floorboards, each burst a reminder of what I'd allowed. Rosie barely ate at dinner. She pushed peas around, nodded when asked if she was tired, then excused herself early. When I checked on her, she was already curled under the quilt back to the door, Comet parked beside the bed like a waiting dog. I whispered good night. She didn't reply. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face when I told her to sit out, the small, confused, "Is something wrong?" echoing like punishment. By 2 a.m., I gave up and slipped into the living room, hoping the cool air might settle the ache in my chest. That's when I saw her sketchbook on the armchair. It was open, as if she'd shut it too fast or lost the will to finish. I picked it up, bracing myself. The first drawing was the cousins under the willow tree, perfectly detailed. And off to the side was Rosie, drawn small, separated by a thick black vertical line. Above her, she'd written, "Just the helper." The next drawing was the family portrait. Every adult smiling, posed just right, the lake shining behind them. Rosie wasn't in the frame. She'd drawn herself beneath it, boxed in by another black line. Underneath, not part of this. The last page undid me. A group of kids in wheelchairs with crutches, braces, hearing aids, all of them behind the same dark line. On the other side stood a perfect family. Beneath it, she'd written, "The ones who ruin the picture." I pressed the sketchbook to my chest, trying not to wake the house with the sound of my breathing. She had turned her exclusion into drawings more honest than anything my family had ever posted. I sat there until my hands stopped shaking. Then I grabbed my phone. This time I didn't hesitate. I sat alone in that dim living room, the glow from my phone screen lighting my hands, while the rest of the house slept in their curated harmony. My chest still felt tight from the sketches, from the little penciled words my daughter had used to explain a kind of hurt she never should have known. I opened the family group chat first and scrolled through the photos Marcus had sent earlier, every shot crisp, balanced, picture-perfect. Every shot missing Rosie. It was like she'd never existed. I downloaded them one by one, the silence around me deepening as the folder filled. Then I opened TikTok. I'd barely used it except to save recipes and watch Rosie's favorite art accounts, but tonight it felt like the only place big enough for the truth. I started building a slideshow, the images sliding into place with soft transitions that made the whole thing feel almost deceptively gentle. I let them play in order, the cousins, the siblings, the 3 generations lined neatly like a catalog, the kind of photos people frame and hang above staircases. When I reached the last shot, the full family photo, I added text across the screen. "Do you notice who's missing?" I recorded the voiceover next, my voice low, not quite steady, but clear. I didn't embellish anything. I just said what had happened exactly the way it had unfolded, how Rosie was told her wheelchair would ruin the shot, how she spent the entire afternoon holding sunglasses and phones while everyone else got documented into family history, how she'd drawn herself behind a line because that was the only place she'd been allowed to exist. My finger hovered over the post button, but not out of fear anymore. It was something quieter, something like mourning for the version of me who would have stayed silent. I pressed the button. The video uploaded in seconds. I didn't expect anything right away. I sat back and let the screen dim, thinking maybe a few friends would see it in the morning, but within minutes my phone began buzzing softly, then insistently. Comments started appearing, a slow trickle at first, then faster, people asking where Rosie was, calling out the ableism, stitching their own stories of exclusion. An old co-worker shared it, then a teacher from Rosie's school. Someone tagged a disability advocate named Tasha Monroe. By the time the sun began rising pale over the lake, the notifications were non-stop. Ivy's curated life aesthetic had been overtaken by thousands of users pointing out the hypocrisy. Horizon Vista's official page was flooded with questions about their VP of PR, and in the group chat a message from Marcus popped up. "Lena, what did you do?" I didn't answer. Down the hall, Rosie was still sleeping, unaware that the world was finally seeing the space she'd been cut out of. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible at all. By the time we drove back to Ohio the next day, the video had passed 1 million views. I kept my phone on silent, but the notifications still lit up the screen like a broken traffic signal. Rosie sat in the back seat, humming softly, sketchbook open again, drawing something she didn't show me yet. I didn't push. I just kept driving, letting the miles stretch between us and that lake house. 2 days later, a message appeared in my inbox from Tasha Monroe, the activist everyone on TikTok seemed to know. She said she wanted to meet Rosie not for content, not for performative outrage, but because she believed Rosie's drawings held a mirror a lot of families weren't ready to look into. Her words stayed with me long after I closed the app. When Tasha arrived that weekend, she knelt beside Comet, like she was greeting an old friend, then asked Rosie if she could hear the story from the artist herself. Rosie's eyes widened at the word artist, and she nodded, lifting her sketchbook onto her lap. As she flipped through the pages, she didn't cry or shrink. She explained each drawing like it was a documentary frame, what she felt, what she saw, what she wished had happened instead. Tasha listened without interrupting once. Afterward, she filmed Rosie outside in the fading afternoon light, letting her talk about Comet, about color, about how wheelchairs aren't sad. They're cool if you let them be. Watching Rosie speak so plainly, so comfortably, something inside me loosened. She wasn't hiding anymore. She wasn't waiting for permission. Meanwhile, fallout rippled through the family. Marcus didn't get fired, but Horizon Vista issued a statement about inclusion and reassigned him to a less public-facing role while he completed a long-term training program. Ivy lost several sponsorships in a single week, and after a flood of angry comments, she posted a shaky on-camera apology, this time without the polished lighting or beige backdrop. She said Rosie deserved better. She admitted she cared too much about aesthetics. It wasn't perfect, but it was the closest to real I had seen her in years. Judith didn't call. She mailed a card for Rosie with a gift card for art supplies, tucked inside the handwriting stiff, like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to soften. I didn't reply, but I didn't tear it up either. Rosie's school invited her to create a mural for the hallway, something about belonging. She spent evenings sketching ideas at the kitchen table, her brows furrowed in concentration. She finally settled on a giant picture frame with kids of all kinds inside it, some standing, some sitting, some rolling, each one painted in bright colors that made the whole scene feel alive. When she showed me the final sketch, she grinned and said, "Everyone's in it this time." And for the first time since that day at the lake, I believed her. The mural went up in early October, stretching across the main hallway wall like a banner of everything Rosie had learned to claim. The picture frame she'd drawn had been painted in sweeping gold strokes, and inside it were faces that didn't match perfectly. Bodies that didn't align in neat rows, chairs and crutches, and walkers mixed in with sneakers and backpacks. It was messy and bright and loud in a way that made you stop walking just to take it all in. On the first day, it was unveiled kids gathered around it, like it was a doorway into another world. Rosie didn't say much, she just watched her fingers tapping a gentle rhythm against Comet's wheel. Later that week, when I picked her up from school, she handed me a printed photo of the mural. Someone had written a quote at the bottom, a sentence Rosie had said during Tasha's interview. "If someone tells you your wheelchair ruins the picture, maybe they're the ones who shouldn't be in it." Seeing those words in print hit me harder than hearing them spoken. They weren't sharp. They were honest. And they were hers. At home, I hung the photo on our living room wall. Right beside it, I placed the portrait a local photographer had taken of the two of us, Rosie in her purple flowered dress, Comet glowing with its teal lights, my arms around her as she laughed so hard her shoulders shook. There was no attempt to hide anything, no angling ourselves to fit someone else's frame. It was imperfect, asymmetrical, completely ours. Standing there looking at the two images side by side, I realized something that should have been obvious. For years, I thought keeping the peace meant swallowing things, smoothing over cracks, pretending everything was fine so no one would explode. But all it did was make my daughter smaller, quieter, easier to overlook. Silence didn't protect her. It erased her. I don't know if Marcus will ever understand the damage he caused, or if Ivy will hold on to the lessons she claims to have learned. I don't know if Judith will ever say the words she owes Rosie. Maybe they will. Maybe they won't. What I do know is this. I will never again let anyone Photoshop my child out of her own life. Not with a comment, not with a lie, not with a smile that doesn't reach their eyes. This time Rosie stands in the center of the frame, and I'm finally strong enough to stand there with her,